And before we let you go, George, we've got to ask you about the fact that, we lost very recently a real love, a deeply loved man in British boxing, one of the most loved men, I think, Henry Cooper, whose funeral it was as well this week. What are your memories of Henry?
Well, most importantly, we buried a piece of class, and let's hope that someone else will resurrect it someday, because there has been little class since his day. He changed history, He had Muhammad Ali out, Angelo Dundee cut the gloves and let the cat out of the bag. He could have changed the way history had gone in boxing. He'll always be remembered that the man not only who could be king, but was truly a king of boxing.
Listen, George, it's great to have you on the programmes. Thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
That's the great George Foreman.
You liked that, Ellie, didn't you?
Yeah, well,
that one.
I like having legends on my show. We have it every time with you guys, obviously, but George is the real deal. And he talked about, the way he talked about Henry, buried a bit of class this week. He was sheer class, wasn't he? And I think that the warmth that surrounded his life and his funeral was a real mark of the man, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And I have to say this, I think it influenced how some people spoke about him as a boxer as well. And it often happens when, as you said, a deeply loved boxer passes. I have to say sometimes they suddenly become better than they actually were. And being harsh about this, I found that was the case with Henry Cooper. There were people saying that he only weighed 13.5 stone during his career, and therefore had there been a cruiserweight division at that time, he would have been a world champion. But he lost to guys who were weighing the same as him at that time. If we're brutally honest about it, he was just short of the top draw. But what happens is you get drowned in this revisionist history because of the emotion around the passing of somebody like this. But he was a very exciting fighter, a very capable fighter, but ultimately just short of the very top.
And his first 3 years as a professional, when he was a baby, and this is a compliment. He fought, I think, 20 times. He lost 6. He was knocked spark out 3 times. So for him to come back when he was a 21, 22-year-old, to go on 5 or 6 years later to trade punches with Cassius Clay / Ali to Wembley in 1963 to fight George was talking about, which many people forget, Mike, was a world title eliminator. Because Ali's next fight, if I'm not mistaken, was
Sonny
against
Liston.
Sonny Liston.
Yeah.
So that's how close Henry was, and he did fall short. And there's one other thing that happened, and he was a dignified human being, and he did carry himself well, and he was loved and adored, and he's the first boxer to receive a knighthood. But we talked earlier on about hated and exchanges. He hated Joe Bugner, the guy that beat him in that last fight. I'm talking about a flesh-crawling hatred. And if you don't believe me, go onto the BBC website and look at the Inside Sport piece that was done with Henry Cooper and Joe Bugner in 2008, and you can see Cooper pulling back. It was staggering, and that hate, I think, burned a bit of a hole, made him a little bit bitter towards the end. And a lot of people, I mean, it sounds like we may be being a bit anti-Cooper here. We're not, because we're praising his career. A lot of the people that were praising him the other day, I'm going to steal a line from my father, who said, "I wonder when was the last time they saw him," because. Am I right, Mike? I can see you nodding your head there.
Yeah. And I first got involved in boxing pretty much at the end of Henry Cooper's career. What I would say was that he was presented as not so much the legitimate face, but the respectable face of boxing, and that's what the sport owes him. That he delivered the sport to a much wider audience at that time than it would ever have reached in this country.
Yeah, and I can remember the couple of times I met him. I just can't remember ever meeting such a gentle, nice, classy man. And on BBC, there's a special programme on Saturday night on BBC Two. It's called Our Henry, a tribute to Sir Henry Cooper. Sir Michael Parkinson, Bobby Charlton, Jimmy Tarbuck, Barry McGuigan, Frank Bruno among the guests. It's at 9:45 on Saturday night, or you can watch it instead at 11:20 next Tuesday.